Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Monkey here for MMOBomb.com, and welcome back to the Free Play Podcast, episode 89. Today is October 29th, 2013, and we've got a whole just platter of news for you. We're just going to unveil this and dump it right on top of you. You can eat it all up one bit at a time, or just gorge yourself down on it. Starting off, we got a little bit of Merc Elite news. It's going into open beta just for Europeans, so congratulations to you guys. But it is a MOBA, so that may be a bad thing at the same time. However, it's also a shooter, so we've got a little bit of discussion there to talk about. DC Universe Online is sprucing itself up for PlayStation 4 release. Are you guys even caring about that? We'll find out. Path of Exile launching in completely 1.0 update, getting a lot of extra stuff with that. It's not just a label change. APB Reloaded getting a brand new engine. It is now Unreal 3 2011 version. Does that matter? Are people going to come back to shoot at each other in higher fidelity? We'll talk about that with our co-host. And then finally, City of Steam is gaining steam, or losing steam, I guess you could say. It's uplifting itself from one publisher and dropping itself, I guess, within its own self. It's going to be self-publishing, and we'll talk a little bit about what that's going to be for players and how it's going to affect them and their characters. Now, of course, before we actually get into all of this, we have our co-host. And unlike previous weeks, we actually don't have Jason Winter with us. Coming in here, we have Squid and Kevin. You have met them before on previous hosts, and not hosts, or previous casts, I guess you could say. We'll start with Squid. How are you doing this fine evening, Squid?
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. A little bit winded, a little bit out of breath, if you could say that. It's a long intro to get through, you know. And then we got Kevin over here, who apparently is blowing his nose. Kevin.
I am not blowing my nose. I'm just exhaling very loudly because I'm full of air. I don't know. Sorry
it's
about that.
It's full of air. Is it hot air?
It's hot air, yes.
It is hot air.
And cold air and lukewarm air. I don't know if it's body temperature air. I guess it's hot.
If it's hot and it's cold and it comes out, will it actually create a tornado?
That would be so cool.
Tornadoes out of your nostrils? That would be amazing.
I would love to see tornadoes.
Imagine cleaning off your desk with tornadoes.
That would be cool.
Alright, so why don't we go ahead then and just drop right into the news here for this week. Starting with Merc Elite going into open beta in the EU, not in the ENA. Which I think some people got a little bit confused and thought I was ragging on or complaining that the ENA didn't get it before the EU in the article. When in fact I was just surprised. Because it's not really something common. But then again, it's a MOBA. So a lot of people are like, oh, it's just a MOBA anyways, who really cares? But I don't know, it kind of looks pretty interesting. Kevin, you actually got to play it a little bit. I'm curious to know what you thought of it. Can you kind of explain what you experienced?
I did. I'm going to preface it by saying that I had to deal with some major lag issues. So there was times where I'd click a mouse and wait 5 seconds for it to do anything. But when it ran well, it was quite enjoyable. So it plays kind of like a top-down... I guess kind of like a top-down shooter, but with a little more strategic planning, and it definitely required you to use your abilities more like a MOBA. There was 3 major command points that you're trying to take control of, at least in what I got to play, and you spend a lot of your time trying to basically flank and get high ground, because all of it matters. You only have a limited field of view. There's no fog of war, your whole map's uncovered. You can only see what you would normally be able to see if you were these people. And then, higher ground does more damage against lower ground stuff, and vice versa. So there was a whole lot of strategy involved. But the actual gameplay was pretty fluid, when it wasn't lagging out. But again, playing from NA on a EU server, I kind of expected that. But it did a lot of different things. When you hear MOBA, you always think of lanes and menus and stuff. Having none of that really kind of changed it. If I were to compare it to any current games that people may have been able to play, it played a lot like Magicka in some senses, at least as far as the map layout, but with a very, very unique mechanics, especially with the whole MOBA style skills with very, very shooter mechanics on top of that.
So you mentioned the field of view. Can people actually can you see behind you in a MOBA like League of Legends, for example? When with fog of war, you can see in a radius around you, in a 360 radius.
A little bit. It's kind of just behind you, but they could get pretty close to you from behind, and you would have no idea they were there. Like
flanking positions, essentially.
Yeah.
I see. So you would say it's more shooter than it is MOBA.
I would, but at the same time, it's not straight up shooter either. It's definitely a blend of the two.
Okay, so it's not like you don't aim at like people's heads and stuff like that. It's more like you click on them and you shoot in their general direction and use your spells.
Yeah.
But the spells are like rockets and, machine guns and stuff.
Yeah, and they're actually pretty balanced. That was my biggest fear, is that we'd have, like, you'd see some spells that just...
I guess we should say, like, abilities, because spells think of magic, and I guess a grenade to a face isn't really magical.
Yeah, I guess you were probably right there. Yeah, abilities is probably the better sense.
Yeah. All right. Now, Squid here. I'm curious, Squid. You're not a big MOBA person. You're not really a big shooter person.
Yeah, this is like the best of both worlds that I don't participate in.
You're like, I don't even like touch this at all. Would you be interested since you don't have to say farm and like get abilities? What are you doing, Kevin?
I don't know. I'm gonna mute my mic when I'm not talking.
It sounded like he was like flipping his belt buckle. Since there's no like having to kill minions or get items or anything like that, and it's not the hardcore portions of like a shooter where you have to aim at people's heads and have to aim. You just kind of put your cursor on top of the target and hold down the trigger. I'm curious, would this be something, Squid, that you would is it like not as hardcore from both of those worlds where it might entice you to play it, or is it still just too far to like the right or the left essentially?
Way too far. Like, it's a fast action game from what it seems. So it's definitely in that section where I'm not interested in it at all, because I'm such a slow gamer. That's why I like strategy games and turn-based games. And this is one of those categories where it's just going way too far to like fast action, having to have to like have actions per minute on your keyboard and casting abilities nonstop. Like that's too much for me.
There is a turn-based like MOBA out there. I forget the name off the top of my head, but looking at it, it kind of seemed like it removes sort of like the elements that made MOBA so good. So I think even in that sense, if we were to actually introduce you to a turn-based MOBA, I think it wouldn't be very enjoyable from that perspective, because I don't think that that kind of genre doesn't do well as a turn-based. But yeah, certainly there's games like this that there are just groups of players who are interested, no matter how they change it or change the elements to it. Kevin, I was kind of curious, since you played it, it was browser based, it was in the browser. Did that really affect your gameplay experience? Really, did you find that it was more difficult or clumsy or not as graphically impressive?
No, I was pretty impressed. I mean, yeah, I guess the one thing would be it wasn't quite as graphically intensive as impressive as something like Dota, but I mean, on
what about League of Legends?
It was almost, yeah, I mean, yeah, we could put it up there very, very close to League of Legends, maybe just slightly below. But again, it was so early on that there's always the ability to add more to the graphics that I'm not going to say that it couldn't be as equal to League of Legends. I mean, it was definitely better than what I expected from a browser. It plays, especially once you're on it, it kind of gives you the feel of a client, except you aren't in a client. And then, yeah, all the matchmaking, everything like that works the same way. So.
Awesome. Alrighty then, so let's go ahead then and move on to our next article. We're going to be switching gears, talking about DC Universe Online. Now, DC Universe Online is superhero MMO, where you fly around with capes, and you can be good guys, bad guys, all kinds of guys. Thug life guys, you can just make whatever. But it's getting ready to transition, I guess, over to the PlayStation 4. It's going to be one of those next-gen games, or it's going to be on a next-gen console, I guess you could say. Not so much a next-gen game in itself. But the latest update for it is going to do quite a lot. It's going to rework the leveling 1 through 30 experience. It's going to update a lot of the geometry in the actual world, improve some of the graphics, and make it easier to sort of start raiding with getting your conquest points a little bit faster, or they're like tokens essentially. My question to you guys is, okay, they're doing all these updates, they're changing this stuff for the PlayStation 4 so that it's more appealing. But would people who buy a PlayStation 4 want to play something that was originally created as a title to launch simultaneously on the PC and the PlayStation 3? I mean, kind of thinking like, if you're going to spend $400, $500 on a console, are you really going to be playing an MMO from 2 or 3 years ago on it? Like, what do you guys think? We'll start with Squid.
I guess some people would. I don't know. Maybe they didn't even know this game existed. Maybe it'll be retouted as this kind of new-ish thing Like, I don't know how Sony's going to promote this.
Did you get a chance to actually look at the comparison video of before and after with the graphics? Are you looking at it right now?
Yes, I'm gonna look at it right now.
Kevin, did you actually get a chance to take a look at it?
I did, and yeah, it wasn't like a huge difference. I mean, there was something there, but like you're like, woo. I mean,
Can you explain a little bit of what it was?
Mostly it's just like lighting stuff. I mean, there's a couple areas where you can see a little bit like better stuff. You see some banners that are like, okay. I think the big one that you see is like it's the lighting. It seems to have a little bit better shading and stuff like that. But yeah, nothing like super like mind blowing.
I like how you like stopped on the banners a little bit. Like, was it just me, or those banners, like, there was something off about those banners?
I don't know if I want to call them cheesy or just like, yeah, you kind of hang on them while you're like looking at them like, okay.
They're moving, but they look like GIFs somehow. They look like animated GIF moving banners. I don't know. Maybe it was the angle that we saw it, but it's funny that you actually hung on that as well, because I looked at that, I was like, I don't know, there's something with the, banners aren't usually something I would, like, rest on and be like, oh man, this game has terrible banners. I'm not sure. Now, the other side of that, of course, is the revamp and the leveling experience 1 through 30, like Squid was saying, hopefully trying to get some of those newer players that bought into the PlayStation 4 to try it out. I kind of wonder, like, if you buy a PlayStation 4, chances are you owned a PlayStation 3 at one point. So, if you didn't play the DC Universe Online then, are you coming back to it because it's a revamped experience, or are you coming back to it because it seemed like something brand new? It just kind of seems like I'm really trying to just wrap my brain around who is this update for, Is this for brand new people who have never heard about the game? Because there is a new leveling experience. And it seems like they're trying to make it a little bit more appealing to those who have played previously with the graphical update. But I don't know. It doesn't really seem like Sony has gone the extra mile, I guess you could say, to really entice everybody. Because there's a lot of good PC ports that are going to be moved over to the PlayStation 4 that do have like that next-gen style or feeling of graphics. And I'm kind of curious, Squid. The idea of a MMO on a console, one of the first ones was DC Universe Online, in the sense that it was, not counting Final Fantasy 11. We're gonna skip that one. We're gonna go with the last generation of gaming, when the internet was a little bit faster. Do you think that MMOs will really ever catch on consoles? Like, we had Defiance, which was like a shooter MMO that didn't do very well, that was on console as well. It kind of died out.
I think ones that rely on, like, replayability, I don't think so. Not so much.
And when you speak about replayability, what do you mean?
Like, if there's, like, a lot of MMOs that are on the consoles where you just kind of play through it once or a few times and then you never play that game ever again.
So it's kind of like persistent, like, updates and, like, the world keeps expanding, or more like a sandbox environment?
I'm not quite sure. Let's, like, try to reword this.
Well, while she rewords that, Kevin, I'm your side of the story. What do you think? Do you think that, it seems like Sony tried with the PlayStation 3. It didn't seem like it was quite the time to move MMOs onto consoles. Now they're going to retry with DC Universe Online. And then they may even retry with EverQuest Next, seeing it's had the same sort of like minimized amount of skills available to you, just like in DC Universe Online. So I'm kind of curious. Sony really seems dead set on getting MMOs to be popular on consoles. Do you think that's something that they could pull off?
Yes and no. I really think this update is more for people who have already played. Because I know from one of my friends who actually likes to play this that they do create other characters, and for them to fix the level progression still works for people who have played. Because, like, okay, I can make another character, and this time I won't hate going through all the questing and stuff because it's done a little bit better. But as far as for trying to get people to go on the PS4, I think what it'll really require is the ones who currently play to move to the PS4 and to show that, oh yeah, this is fun to play on this, and then maybe that will, if it's doing well with the number of people that are just moved over, we'll start bringing in new people. I'm not sure how well it's going to do at brand new people to it, because again, like you said, this is a next-gen console. It's going to be hard for them to get like an older game to seem amazing or seem worth playing compared to all the other things that probably will be available for it.
Finally, one last thing I wanted to touch on is, like, it really seems like Sony's trying to make the PlayStation 4 out to be like the free-to-play console. Like, we talk about a lot of players who play on PC just to play free-to-play games. Like, that's all they play primarily on the PC is free-to-play games, whether that be because their computer can't handle it, or they don't have the money for it, or what have you. Maybe they just like free-to-play games. I'm really curious, do you think there'll be a point where players are buying, like, the PlayStation 4, or we'll say the Xbox One, because we don't know what 2 years is going to hold for the free-to-play on the Xbox. Do you think there'll ever be a point where people are like, yeah, I would opt to buy a $400 or $500 console? Well, you know, maybe it's down to $399 at that point a couple years from now. Other than, like, you know, build a PC, do you think that Sony can ever reach that point where it's just as appealing to play it on the PlayStation 4 than, say, a Steam box?
Not when it comes to specifically free-to-play games. I don't think there's very many people out there that buy consoles brand new just to play free-to-play games.
Yeah, certainly not right now, because there's barely any out there. I'm just kind of curious if you think it could head that direction, or if people will always sort of gravitate towards using PCs for free-to-play.
I think so, yeah. Because it's the utility of it. You use your PC for other aspects. A person who wants to play free-to-play games isn't going to buy a console, because you can't use a console for anything else. You can't write your paper with a console.
Yeah, imagine writing like your thesis paper with like the controller from the PlayStation 4 clicking like every single keyboard action, and then space, new paragraph, X, start. That would be extremely tedious.
I think it will get some people, but yeah, not a huge following. I mean, the biggest one is it cheaper than the computer I'd have to build to play this game? Because if you have a computer that does everything else you need it to do, but just play some of these, except for play some of the games you want to play, you're then like, okay, so how much money is it going to cost for me to get my computer to be able to play that? If a PS4 is cheaper, I definitely think they go that route. I mean, being that they also get the added, you know, PS4-ness of it, if they ever want to play other video games.
The PS4-ness.
Well, yeah, that's going to be like an adjective, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, if it's someone who doesn't really have the computer, then they'll probably just go and build it. But if they do and they're like, well, I'm in this kind of like hem-hawing, not really sure, I think those are the people that the PS4 will really appeal to from the free-to-play side of it. Of course, there's plenty of people that are just going to be buying a PS4 for all the other games on it, and they'll stumble across, I'm sure, some free-to-play games that they will end up picking up just because they're like, well, I'm bored of these other ones, but I don't really have money to buy a new game yet. What do we have available?
I think that's how everybody sort of gets introduced to free-to-play, is they get bored with the games they have purchased, and then they go out looking for games that are free, or they stumble upon free games, and like, hey, I'm in this situation where I can't buy one, I'll just try these out. Certainly it was like that in the past, but now we're moving more towards people who are seeking out free-to-play games just in general. So we'll have to see. November 15th is when the PlayStation 4 launches. That is also when the DC Universe Online patch for both the PlayStation 4 and the PC should launch simultaneously. So check that out. Let us know if you guys are going to be headed back to the world of crime fighting, or I guess being a lord of crime if you're going to be a villain in DC Universe Online. Moving on, we have Path of Exile. It has finally been released after like 2 years in beta. Man, that game was, I think that's like the leading game in beta, like for the longest amount of time, maybe. Like actual beta, like where players can play it, because you don't count like Diablo 3, because that game was in development hell for a while. But Path of Exile was launched, went to 1.0 update, and there was quite a lot of meat to that update. A lot of new bug fixes, some new worlds, and final in-boss. And, you know, really, if you're a huge fan of Path of Exile, you're already going to be probably checking this out. But I looked at this from sort of a player who hasn't played a while, and there's a lot of stuff to check out now. Like, I'd imagine if you're in the beta for quite a long time, you're going to have played everything that was available in the beta, and may have sat the game away and, you know, once it hit open beta and been like, okay, I've experienced what Path of Exile is. But this new update adds a new class, the Scion class at max level. Adds a lot of stuff. And Kevin and Squid, I'm kind of curious. Are you guys much of like action RPG players? I know, Squid, you've played a little bit of like Torchlight 2. I'm kind of curious your thoughts on Path of Exile as a whole, now that it's sort of wrapped up and quote-unquote complete. Obviously, free-to-play is never complete. They add new stuff. But it has reached a final build and that they can consider it release. Would this entice you to play it as a whole, the game, or is it not your style of ARPG, or just not your style of gaming in general?
Not really my style of gaming in general. I've picked up a couple ARPGs just throughout time. I mean, I've even played Path of Exile a little bit, or Path of Exile. But, yeah, it's just not really... I mean, I don't know. At times they seem a little dead or repetitive. Like, I played a lot of, like, the Diablo 3s and stuff like that, or Diablo 2 and just everything. And for me, I find it hard to find anything unique to them anymore. So it's kind of just the same thing with a different skin. So I kind of got burnt out on the genre.
Squid?
I'd have the same thing. Like, ARPGs, they just seem grindy after a while. You're like, oh, I've killed hundreds of monsters now. What am I doing, really? Like, what is the story? I don't even know where I'm going. Like, what's the point? And then you see the same format in most RPGs. Like, they have that same format. They just look differently, or they have a different theme.
Path of Exile sort of had the enticement that you could be whatever you wanted. Like, this had this huge skill tree that you could just put points into and passively change your attributes and that, and play how you wanted based off the skills that you acquired. So in that sense, I think that Path of Exile for myself, I kind of echo a little bit of your sentiments. The Path of Exile was unique in that respect, but when it boiled down to it, it's still a lot of left clicking. It's a lot of left clicking. It's a lot of mashing of buttons. And I like you said, I don't think really that formula gets any better despite, changing the overall systems connected to it. There is certainly an audience for this type of game. Obviously, there's a lot of players. I think it strikes upon that need or that urge to get loot, because these are very loot-driven games. Getting better loot, finding that really special rare item, and so that touches on that bone, if you will. But for me personally, as someone who has played probably about 15 hours of Path of Exile, I have to agree with you guys. I think action RPGs really need sort of like a fundamental refresh as a whole for it to be a new enticing genre. Which is something that's funny because I don't think we talk, in terms of our ARPGs, people think about that so much. When they talk about like MMOs or FPSs, and you think of like something fundamentally changing in an MMO, that would be going from like tab targeting to like, free action range combat where you're aiming and all that stuff. In Path of Exile, or in ARPGs in general, we haven't really seen that shift from what made the originals, way back in the early 90s sort of concrete, and that's left clicking and using your abilities and stuff like that. So would you guys feel like it's just the idea of ARPGs as general, or it's like key mechanics in ARPGs that really sort of push you guys away from them?
It's the key mechanics. It's the same themes it's always top down. It's always kind of like scrolly. It's always grindy. It's really grindy most of the time.
Yeah, the mechanics for me too. It's a lot of the same, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. You have a hard time finding anything truly unique about it.
Maybe it is time for that genre to look into freshing itself as a whole and sort of redefining what an ARPG actually is, It could possibly be the time for that. We could always mix it up and make something new. Things for future developers to consider, I suppose. But moving on, we have APB Reloaded once again in the news. Man, this game can't seem to stay out of the news somehow. Like, it's always in the news at least once a year, it seems. This time it's getting a brand new engine. And it's moving from an earlier version of the Unreal Engine to, I guess, Unreal Engine 3 from 2011 or 12. Hopefully getting a little bit more stability with the networking code, obviously better graphics and fidelity. But the question is, do people really care? Is APB sort of like a been there, done that kind of thing? I was reading a little bit of the news article comments on our site, and it kind of seemed like people didn't really care so much that the game had bad graphics. They were really more upset with the hackers and like quote-unquote pay-to-win aspects. Some of them were arguing that there was pay-to-win, other ones were arguing that there wasn't. And I'm kind of curious for you guys, as a whole, if we're just looking directly at the update of a brand new engine, is this something you're excited Would this be something that would excite you if you were like an APB player that had sort of gone away from the game? Or do you think that this would sort of just be like window dressing, if you will?
Yeah, having read the full article and everything too, I think the more exciting side of it all is actually the fact that with this new engine, they should be able to put content out faster. And I think that will do more. I mean, if they're willing to switch an engine that lets them put out content faster, I really feel like they're trying to focus more on the player experience, which one should hopefully help deal with all the hacking issues and stuff that kind of floated around early. But just in general, making sure that there's new content to keep people like with what they need. But yeah, they really need to fix the pay-to-win sides of it all. I played it for a little bit, and I love the idea of it. It's silly. It's open world. You can kind of get away with so much. But yeah, the cash shop was just unbalanced. But I think a lot of people will really like the new graphics. It wasn't really that bad comparatively for when it first came out. And staying on top of it, I think it's unique enough of a game that it will allow it to kind of survive.
Very well. You know, it's kind of interesting. It's one of the few games out really that are not next gen, but that are not super old, that capture sort of that GTA experience. And that's something I think that no matter what bugs it may has, you know, people can kind of see where it's trying to go and see what it's trying to do. And keep in mind, EVE Online, I'm going to use EVE Online as an example, you know, that game is a sandbox open world environment. I would have to argue it's a little less structured than APB, but it took a long time for that game to get up to Steam. And if APB feels like they can really execute this sort of game engine update, it could be a few years before it gets rolling, but it could very well get rolling. I mean, you know, if there's enough of a dedicated fan base, and, you know, the company behind APB Reloaded actually goes through and removes that hackers, because that's a big thing with FPSs, then I can certainly see a resurgence of APB Reloaded. It's just that, you know, 3-year dud. It just took 3 years for it to actually get going or something like that. Squid, I'm curious from your perspective. Again, this is more of a shooter, but would you be like a driver in this for someone? Would you be like the getaway driver for like a robbing? Would you be a robber or would you be a cop? Who would you be?
Probably neither. APV kind of has this weird, it kind of feels like it squandered away its chances of being successful. I don't know if it could be or not in the future, but certainly it had a really interesting concept, like a unique design, but then it just didn't work. Like, and it still doesn't work. Most fans that I've read, they say they like the concept, they like the idea of making highly customizable characters, but there's like XYZ, there's like fundamental huge problems to the game that have not really been addressed. And even with the new engine, there's still those big problems that have not been addressed so much.
So it's more like a management issue as a whole.
Yes.
I will say something though, Spunk. You said that it's kind of like the only Grand Theft Auto game. Well, I will say this: it is still less buggy than Grand Theft Auto Online. So I'm pretty sure that with Grand Theft Auto 5 coming out and people wanting to just having played that and like, oh, I like this game again, looking for something like that online, they might actually turn to this because of how bad GTA Online is.
They may, and it's funny you mentioned that because GTA Online right now has this like bad rap system whereby if you kill people excessively in the world, you actually become a bad sport. And you can only play with other people who are bad sports, which is very difficult because it's a lot less people available to the pool. You can't play with friends who aren't bad sports at that point. So, I mean, it's kind of funny to have a GTA Online game that actually punishes you for the mayhem, you know? Because that's one of the things that I think APB Reloaded really embraces is the mayhem of just driving around and shooting people just willy-nilly for no reason, you know? That's sort of like one of the main draws. So I would definitely check it out if you're sort of irritated by what's been introduced from GTA Online. The new update for APB Reloaded is set to come out, I believe, early next year is when the new engine will launch, along with some other improvements and updates. So check it out, guys, and let us know in the comments whether you would be interested in seeing what it has in store for you once it comes out. Finally, guys, our last article for tonight equals City of Steam to self-publish. It equals it. I don't know. I'm a computer, I guess. I have to speak in binary for some reason. City of Steam is going to be self-publishing. It's going to be removing the rights from R2 Games Publishing, and they're going to be taking it over at Mechanist Games specifically the developers, are going to be taking over development of it and revamping portions of the game. Apparently, they weren't too happy with R2 games. They weren't too happy with how they were treating their MMO. So they decided to, no. They're going to take it back and show everybody what a proper City of Steam is made of, which is Steam, I guess. What do you guys think?
I applaud them because personally I think R2 has ruined too many games, so I'm glad they did their best to try to get their hands on their own thing. I just hope that they're able to, because trying to self-publish, obviously, there's a reason you have publishers that have the money, all the other stuff to help you get the game out, and I really hope this game doesn't suffer because of that. I'm wondering if they had to change anything. I noticed that they had to change the name, so just really makes me slightly worried that there isn't anything else they had to change because of just licensing or whatever. The game had a lot of promise. I really hope that it pulls it off this way. It'd be so much better for the game if they do.
I will say it was probably the most visualized version of a steampunk MMO out there. Like, it was as steampunky as you could possibly get in an MMO.
Oh, yes. If for any of the steampunk fans, I wonder if there's any in this conversation. I'm sure they love the visuals. I'm sure.
Yes, it was very visually appealing. In fact, Mechanist Game isn't just moving it over. They're also going to be revamping a lot of things, they say. They say they're going to be overhauling some of the level art and quests, change to the economy and statistics, new features, new content, and a flying fortress for any characters of any level to sort of inhabit, which, hey, I'm all for flying fortresses. I think that's pretty awesome. But that seems like a lot of stuff for the developer to handle along with publishing. And the thing about having a publisher is the publisher usually funnels money into you to help you, get started. So if they're self-publishing, that's a lot of extra incurred costs. And they say that the turnaround time, they're shutting down on November 21st. But then they're going to reopen the same month. And I'm like, that's like 10 days max, to do stuff. Are they already working on this? Like, it really sort of worries me what they could actually accomplish by the time, they sort of, I think, maybe getting a little bit ahead of themselves, possibly, and might be biting off more than they can chew. What do you think, Squid?
We'll have to see. It seems like they're very sure about what they're going to do. It seems like maybe it's going to just close down the 21st of November, just reopen that day. Because they haven't given a day. I mean, they're not really giving any details. Like, if you visit their site now, it's just like a small press release and saying what they're going to do and saying they don't like R2's performance as a publisher. But it seems like they're just going to bounce back up out of nowhere.
There are a couple of key things to keep in mind, a little bit of downsides. They did say that they're going to be removing a couple of features that they didn't feel were nice or were useful, I guess you could say. They didn't elaborate on what those features would be. And then also, the other thing is that if you had a character on the R2 servers, they're not going to be able to transfer those characters over to Mechanist servers. So you will have to start again.
That's the big thing. People are going to have to restart their characters. That's the huge thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of a big downer, because moving, it's one thing to move publishers when service is interrupted for a few days, but you still get all your stuff back. But it's another thing to sort of like say, you're not going to get anything back. It's going to be like a complete revamp of sorts, essentially. And given the fact that City of Steam has already been in sort of like this perpetual beta state for quite some time now, not Path of Exile time, but quite some time. I'm a little worried. I have to say, I'm a little bit concerned by this, but we'll see. We got someone who's optimistic, and then we got Kevin who's pessimistic, and then we got me in the middle, I guess.
Who just hopes it comes out alive.
I just hope it continues to be a thing, in some form, right? As long as it's not a MOBA, as long as it doesn't get converted to a MOBA. I think it actually at one point had a MOBA mode in the PvP. Oh, please, City of Steam, don't become City of Steam the MOBA. Just whatever you do.
I'm pretty sure you're okay on that one.
I'd hope so. I hope so.
You never know.
You never know. Crazy stuff can happen.
Cross those fingers, knock on wood.
I've seen crazy things happen in the MMO world. But alright, let's go ahead then and move on to our weekly bombs. Weekly Bombs are, of course, when we tell you guys what has been the best of this week for free-to-play gaming, or gaming in general for us, and what's been the worst, possibly. So I will start, of course, and I'm going to give an A-bomb to Zombie Studios. Zombie Studios are the creators of Blacklight Retribution. They announced this week Phantom Army, which it's like a third-person, mobile-based, cover-based shooter, but it actually has a lot of resemblance to Special Forces Team X, which was a previous indie title they released for like $15 on Steam. They got terrible ratings and ultimately failed. So it kind of seems like I see where Zombie Studios is going now with their development. Blacklight Retribution was sort of the sequel to the original indie $15 title called Blacklight Tango Down. It did moderately more successful than Special Forces Team X, which spawned, of course, Blacklight Retribution, the free-to-play shooter that everybody plays a lot now. Much more popular than the original Tango Down. And now Zombie Studios put out Special Forces Team X, and Phantom Army comes shortly after that. Now, I did a little research, and Phantom Army does have some of the exact same sort of systems or mechanics in place as Special Forces. So it seems to me, Zombies just releasing a game for $15, making as much money off as they can, and then revamping it into its own free-to-play version. And to that I say, no, that's not cool with me. That's like a double jip. It's like you don't support a game and then you release a free-to-play version of it afterwards. I don't know. That's my A-bomb for Zombie Studios. And that's going to be my discussion of that. Squid.
No da-bomb? You're not going to give a da-bomb to anything?
No, I just give an A-bomb this week. You don't have to give a double.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Alright. So, my da-bomb would go to Democracy 3.
What's Democracy 3?
If you ever thought, hey, I would run that country really awesome if only someone would give me a chance, you could buy Democracy 3 and be a ruler of a country. A few countries. You get Germany, Canada, America, England, France. Most of the Western countries. You don't get to play any Eastern countries or anyone else anywhere. Australia is thrown in there, which is Australia, okay.
So nothing like Japan or anything like that?
No, you don't get anything like that. But you start off as a country as it is. So if you play as America, you start off with trillions and trillions of dollars of debt, running at billions of dollars of a deficit. Or if you play as Germany, you get a surplus you don't have a deficit, you have a surplus. Like I think it's like an $80 billion surplus that you start off with. So you get to just start off in whatever situation you want to in the world.
Who would ever start off in America?
I have. It's a nightmare. You immediately crash the credit rating. You're like, oh, I just got my credit rating downgraded, and people are rioting in the streets, and I got assassinated.
So it's fairly realistic then.
Yes.
I don't know. I haven't seen so many riots in the streets here in the U.S. quite yet. But maybe that's a foretelling. And then, Kevin, what is your da-bomb, A-bomb for this week?
I'm giving a da-bomb to, well, I'll tell a story first. So I was hanging out with some friends, and we were talking about, like, just narrating your life. Like, I was talking about the movie Stranger Than Fiction, how I always love that he's, hearing a narrator. Like, oh, we should try out this one game, because that's all it is. There's no one else in there. Everything's narrated. I was like, what? So I got introduced to a game called Stanley's Parable, and it's addictingly fun. Like, it's... your choices actually change what the narrator says. He interacts with you. Okay, I'm going to spoil it. It was these two people that introduced me. But yeah, I'm actually really wanting to play more of it because I had a blast. There were so many times where I'm like, I don't want to listen to him, but you do anyway. Or you're like, I'm going to do whatever I want, and then you just die. Oh, it was awesome.
I've never heard someone end something with, you just die. That was awesome. It was awesome to die. It's the best experience. Alrighty then. Well, no member bombs for this week, but we did have some question of the week responses. And so the question of the week last week was, what is your most rewarding PvP experience you've ever had? Starting with V2099, version 2099 says, for me, the only PvP game I play is Dota 2, and fighting games on consoles. So for him, Dota 2 is one of the most rewarding PvP experiences he's actually had, which I would have to tend to agree. There's a lot, especially with that and fighting games. Both of those are really, they take a lot of practice and a lot of finite control to be good at. So it's really nice to see, you know, when you get that clutch kill or when you get that win, you know, that ace win or that perfect win in a fighting game. Certainly, that can be extremely rewarding. Squid, why don't you take the next guy real quick?
MIFOE Sidecrow.
So we have a thing where even if we don't know how to say their name, we have to botch it as close as possible.
It's like Mifo Sidecrow.
Mifo Sidcrow.
I'm gonna agree with that one. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds right. Guild Wars 2 is my favorite PvP game. I've never had so much fun PvPing in other games.
Now, Squid, me and you have played Guild Wars 2, and we even did some of the PvP in Guild Wars 2.
Yes. I guess the targeting system in the PvP was strange to me. It's just auto-targeting. It doesn't seem very...
Skill-based?
Skill-based.
Yeah. I mean, there was a little bit more mobility. You could, like, dodge out of the way of, like, spells and stuff like that. But yeah, I would definitely agree that you only could dodge a little bit. And so after you dodge those few times, you just, like, auto-get hit by skills. And especially with the world realm versus realm PvP, everything would just lag up because there'd be so many people on the screen at one time, and you couldn't see everybody.
Or the graphics of something would be just taking up the entire screen. You're like, I can't see anything. It just flashes a light.
See, that's one of the things. That's one of the problems I think that there with any game that has realm versus realm or siege castle PvP. It sounds amazing until you get into it, and then you realize it's so laggy, and you can't even tell what's going on. Like, I'm really curious, guys. Is there an actual castle or siege PvP game or MMO out there that you guys have played personally that you found not as laggy or not as cluttered and more organized? The last one I could think of was when Warhammer Online first came out, and you had the siege castle, you know, assaults where you would have like the battering ram and all that stuff, and it seemed a little bit less zergy, if you will. But of course, later on in the game, castle trading started coming up and stuff like that. But I was talking about early on. So Guild Wars 2 for Sidcrow. I'm curious, Sidcrow, do you like it more for the siege, the realm versus realm, or do you like it more for like the instance PvP? Which was your favorite? Let us know in the comments. I'm curious to hear your response to that. Now, the question of the week this week is if you could dress up as one character or thing, it doesn't have to be a person or whatever, from a free-to-play game, specifically free-to-play, because I'll make this a little bit difficult for you, for Halloween, since Halloween is just a couple days away, who would you dress up as and why? So who would you dress up as free-to-play character or thing for Halloween? Now, for those of you who don't have Halloween in your country, just imagine a scary character from a free-to-play game that you would dress up as and tell me what it would be. So, Kevin, who would you dress up as?
I'm going to have to get back to you on that one because there's so many good choices for me. But it's probably going to end up being something like from League of Legends, unfortunately. I'm going to have to be that bad of a person.
I'd understand. Squid, are you going to have to get back to me as well?
I'd probably dress up as an item. Maybe from Neopets. Maybe an egg.
What's an egg?
It's like an egg, but it looks like a plant.
Aw, that just sounds adorable. Now because I know what you look like, I have to imagine you as like an eggplant.
It looks like an egg, and you'd have a stem coming out of the top of your head with like a leaf.
Wasn't there a Pokemon that looked like that? Like it was in an Oddish or something. It looked like a little egg with like the thing. Oh, I don't know. People know what I'm talking about. It had legs and then it had teeth, and it looked like an egg. Yeah, there was an egg Pokemon.
Sprouts,
yeah, there was an egg Pokemon. That's right. All right.
Oh, there's an actual egg Pokemon too. There's different ones.
Yeah. There's so many Pokemon now. There's tons of Pokemon. As for myself, being that I am a extremely tall individual, I always like to think that I would dress up as Swain from League of Legends, just because I haven't seen a good Swain cosplay, and I think that if you had the wings in bird form, specifically bird form, because I'm 6'7", I think that would look pretty huge with like giant wings and like actual beak and. Imagine that
you
walking.
Could pull Fiddlesticks.
But there's already a Fiddlesticks cosplayer.
Yeah.
We saw him there at the League of Legends
I know.
World
He's
Championship.
incredibly good at it too. Like he does a great job of it.
Yeah, I'm not going to encroach on his territory. That's his man. He owns that up. I have to go in a different direction. I have to be another bird. I have to be Swain, and then I can just like perch myself on top of him because he's a crow. He's a scarecrow. We just all go together in one place. But alrighty, guys, that's going to be our question of the week for this week. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of the Free Play Podcast. As always, go ahead and check out our latest articles and news on MMOBomb.com. We update that quite frequently. And as always, if you have any questions, concerns, or just topics that you would like to ask or have us talk about on the next episode, feel free to leave them in the comments down below, guys. For us here at the podcast, this is the time that we go around and give out our social media contacts, whatever. I myself, at Spunkify on Twitter. You can just tweet me at any time and discuss what you think about the show, what you think about me, what you think about MMOBomb, what you think about little birds sitting in trees. I don't care. Anything. And you can always, every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, you can check us out for the Bomb live stream show. Kevin, what is your media contact?
At No Social Media K on Twitter. And I actually have started contacting people a little bit more, and I'm going to start tweeting more. I think I'm going to work on it. We'll see how well that works out, but we'll try.
A tweet a day keeps the doctor away?
I think I want to go for like 3. I want to do like a morning tweet, an afternoon tweet, and an evening tweet, I think is the goal. So we'll see.
Gotcha. You got a schedule. And then, Squid, do you have any way of people contacting you?
Yes, if you would like to contact me, gather a one-eyed albino honing pigeon, release it at midnight, carrying the message you want me to receive, and I will get it.
You know someone's going to try that.
Oh, I think we have to write these instructions down. So it's a one-eyed albino pigeon.
Yeah, honing pigeon.
Honing pigeon. Yeah, honing pigeon. All right. So does it have to be one-eyed when we get it, or do we give it one eye?
It has to naturally have one eye.
Okay, naturally. Okay. All right, I've got those instructions down. We'll be sending out your message tonight. What if you just like all of a sudden got like 10 albino honing pigeons with one eye? So you're like, wow, these are a lot more common than I expected. They suddenly have started appearing on my doorstep. What am I, Harry Potter? Alrighty then, that's going to be our free-to-play cast this week. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. And until next time, we'll see you guys later. Spunkify and the cast out. Later, guys.